So the CFTC recently put out this release regarding certain foreign exchange transactions, and we're going to go over it. So full disclosure, I used to work at the CFTC, and for many years I was the Forex guy. If I was still there, I probably would have had a hand in writing this. This was jointly issued by market participants and DMO, and it was issued by Raul and DMO and Tom Smith and MPD. And Tom Smith was my old boss for many years. And if you see this, Tom, hope you're doing well. Before we tackle this, it's necessary to go back a step and talk about how Forex is regulated after Dodd-Frank. So the CFTC was given authority to regulate swaps by Congress, and there were several rulemakings passed. I worked on one of them dealing with external business conduct standards for swap dealers, and I also worked on the retail Forex rules. And the rules that would apply to Forex or FX depend on how they're doing it and who's doing it. During the negotiation for Dodd-Frank, when different versions of bills were being passed around, there was heavy pushback from the banking industry. They did not want the CFTC involved in what they do a lot of, which is Forex trading. So there was a carve-out put in there called the Treasury Determination, which gave the Department of the Treasury a certain amount of time to decide which kinds of FX transactions would be beyond most of our authority. And what they came up with was that Forex swaps, but not currency swaps, would be exempt from most of our rules. And what's the difference? They sound the same, but they're not. So currency swaps, you're making bets on the movement of currencies, but you're not exchanging the principal. And with Forex forwards or Forex swaps, you're exchanging the principal. So in a Forex forward, you agree to a certain transaction, dollar euro, dollar yen, whatever you want. And at the end of the contract, somebody would make and take delivery of the foreign currency. And in a swap, if it's a Forex swap, the principal is exchanged at the beginning and again at the end, and payments are made in the meantime. But the underlying reference currencies are exchanged, whereas in a currency swap, you're making bets and exchanging money based on movements of currencies, but the underlying currencies are not being exchanged back and forth. And if you're dealing with currency swaps, all the CFTC rules would apply. And if you're dealing with these transactions that were carved out under the Treasury Determination, then only certain rules would apply, like reporting. You'd have to report them when they occur, and the anti-fraud rules. But most of the rest of the rules, such as net capital, clearing, exchange trading, all things like that would not apply. So this interpretation is going to deal with two kinds of transactions that had unclear regulatory treatment, and one is foreign exchange forwards with multiple settlement dates called window FX forwards, and also package FX spot transactions. So we'll go with them one at a time. So this is the background, and as I mentioned, the Treasury Secretary carved out certain transactions from most of the CFTC's rules. So currency swaps, where you're not exchanging the underlying principal, would be subject to all of the CFTC's rules. And Forex forwards and Forex swaps, where you are exchanging the underlying reference instrument, they would not be subject to most of the CFTC's regulations. So the question is, what happens with these window FX forwards? So if you have several delivery dates, it seems kind of like an option, and some people were interpreting it as an option. You have a certain amount of time to deliver the foreign currency, and if it was signed on one date and delivered on the end of the contract, that would be easy. It's a forward, an FX forward. But what if you have 3 or 4 dates in which you can deliver part of it or all of it? And if you don't deliver by those dates, you have to deliver the rest by the end, but you have some option to deliver it earlier. Does that make it an option, or is it still a forward? And under the CFTC's new interpretation, they would still be forwards, because you do have the option to deliver it earlier and at different prices. But if you don't take advantage of that, then you would deliver it at the end, and it's still a forward. And the reason that you have these different delivery dates is because they are generally entered into by commercial parties, and sometimes you are not quite sure when the cash is going to come in. So if you are dealing with international parties and there's a question on a contract when you're going to get paid, because sometimes you get paid 30 days after something's done, sometimes you get paid 90 days after it's done. Sometimes there's a question about whether you're entitled to a payment or not, because if you're building something and it's a percentage of completion contract and you get paid when a certain percentage is completed, how do you know when that's done? So if you have a contract where you are going to exchange dollars for a certain other contract, where you're going to exchange dollars for some other currency, and you know that you're going to get 100% of it within a year, but you might be entitled to more earlier, but you're not exactly sure when, you might have these windows of acceptable delivery built in, and that would be this window FX forward. And the CFTC's view is that because you have all the terms in there, including when the delivery is going to occur at the end, if delivery hasn't occurred before, that they considered it forward, and that they may be adjusted for different settlement dates. And obviously that affects the interest rate, and that's okay as long as you've agreed to it ahead of time. So if you're dealing with a currency that's a very low interest rate, like a Japanese yen, and you're dealing with a currency with a very high interest rate, such as the Turkish lira, then you would be paying a different price if you are delivering at the end of the 1 year as opposed to 6 months, because the delta between the two interest rates is so high. And as long as that's built into the contract, you're fine. It's still considered an FX forward and subject to only the rules that are pertaining to FX contracts that are part of the Forex determination carve-out. So not the full panoply of CFTC rules, the lesser rules that only apply to FX transactions that are carved out by the Treasury Department Forex determination. And this talks about final physical delivery of the currency. And with any forward contract, you are dealing with counterparties who have the ability to make and take delivery. And that same goes with foreign currency. And you might think, well, doesn't everyone have the ability to make and take delivery of currency? Yes and no. You have the ability to make and take delivery of your own currency, but if you are trading in the FX markets, you need to be able to make and take delivery of foreign currency. So if somebody sent me a check that was payable in Japanese yen or euros, I could not just deposit that into my bank account. I would need a bank in Japan or the UK or Paris to take currency that is denominated in that country. And so if I was trading yen and dollars, I would pay dollars from my US bank account, and I would receive yen in my Japanese bank account, and I was calling to make a trade. I would say, what's your price on the Japanese yen US dollar for $100 million notional? And then they would give me a price, and then I would tell them if I'm buying or selling, and then I would give them my Nostro account, which is the US account, and my Vostro account, which is the Japanese account, and then we'd set up the transaction that way. But if I was doing a currency transaction where I'm betting against the price movements of the dollar or the Japanese yen, and I'm not exchanging the physical, I can do that with just a US bank account. I can just say, I want to do a swap. Here's my US bank account. We're going to bet on the price movements between the dollar and the yen, and I don't need a foreign bank account for that. But those would be subject to the full CFTC swap rules, not just these lesser Treasury determination carved out transactions. So again, just because you have these extra windows does not make it an option, because if they did not choose to deliver currency on one of the earlier dates, they're still going to have to deliver all the currency by the last date, the last window. They don't have a choice in that. And in an option, you have the right but not the requirement to make or take delivery, but with a forward, you are obligated to make or take delivery. And so if you have not utilized one of those earlier windows, you still have to deliver on the last date, which is why this is a forward, not an option, even though there are earlier windows which let you do it. So that was one of the transactions that was the subject of this. And the second one is the package FX spot transactions. So generally, spot transactions are different from forwards because forwards could be out any amount of times, but spot transactions are generally T plus 2, the trade plus 2, and they generally take 2 days to clear because it's generally T plus 2, trade plus 2, because although technology has gotten better, in the early days of foreign currency trading, it took 2 days to transfer this money from one bank to another, and that sort of stuck. And spot generally means T plus 2, and longer than that is priced as a forward. And the question arises, well, what if you have this T plus 2 and then you just keep rolling it over every day? Are those rolling spots still considered spot transactions? Sure. Tomorrow next or Tom next transactions, they can be considered spot transactions, just a series of individual spot transactions where you keep rolling them and not one swap. And the key is that they are legally independent transactions. So a swap, you have a series of payments, and economically it might look like rolling spot, but in a swap, you're dealing with one transaction, and those payments are subject to one contract, your ISDA master. And on these individual T plus 2 transactions where you just keep rolling them and rolling them, each one is a separate individual contract. And the courts would look to the four corners of that contract on those 2 days and not anything that happened before. And that's why they're considered separate from the contracts that came before or will come after. And here's the key. Each spot contract has a separate confirmation, often with 2 SWIFT messages that have no linkage between the two. So if one party failed to perform on the first transaction, the other party is still obligated to perform on the second because they're separate transactions. So if I have a contract, I buy yen, sell dollars, and then the next 2 days, we're going to flip that. I'm going to take delivery of the yen, then I'm going to sell yen and buy dollars. And after I'm back to square one, I'm going to do new contracts. If you look at the cash flows, it might look very similar to a swap, but those are individual transactions, each legally enforceable. And if between the time I close out this contract and I try to roll out the other one, there's a problem, it's going to have different legal consequences than a swap where they're all one transaction. So the people involved think these should be viewed as bona fide, deliverable, individual spot transactions, and the CFTC agrees with them. So both divisions said that the spot transactions described above should not be considered FX swaps, provided that they're executed, confirmed, and settled as individual bona fide spot transactions, as I just discussed. And this is the normal disclaimer that this doesn't bind any other division or office, especially the enforcement division. And it definitely doesn't bind anyone at Treasury or the Federal Reserve or SEC. This just relates to these two operating divisions. So I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer it. I'm Pete. I'm putting out these videos to help explain some concepts. If you have any questions about the material presented here or anything else, just drop a comment and I'll give you the disclaimer. I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney, and anything here is not considered legal advice and does not form an attorney-client relationship. This is for educational and informational purposes only and is just my opinion. So good luck, everyone. Have a great day.